We shall move to questions without notice. Are there questions? I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. I refer to the Prime Minister's refusal to answer my question to him yesterday. I again ask the Prime Minister, can he confirm that none of his ministers nor any member of staff made representations or requests to any relevant departments or agencies to support or expedite the issuing of Australian passports to ISIS sympathisers in Syria?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I do thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question and for his obsession with this issue. If only, Mr Speaker, he was as obsessed when ISIS fighters were coming home on their watch. If only when there were 40 people coming home, he was as obsessed. Mr Speaker, I again refer to people who have actually engaged with this issue in real time. Peter Dutton, the Minister for Home Affairs.
Order. Members on my right, the member for Patterson. The member for Cornwall will leave the chamber under 94A. It's highly disorderly. The manager of opposition business is entitled to raise his order to his point of order and is not to be interrupted when he is on his feet. The manager of opposition.
Thanks, Speaker. And it goes to 104A, which is about direct relevance, not about a quote from someone in the past. This is about your ministers. It's not directly relevant. This is about your ministers and agencies and what they knew. It's not about the past.
Your seat. Order. Members on my right, the manager is entitled to raise his point of order. The question was about the issuing of passports for ISIS sympathisers. The Prime Minister was asked a question regarding that under the standing orders. We can keep saying this over and over again, and I'm happy to inform the House. I can't compel the Prime Minister to give a yes-no answer. I can compel him to be directly relevant. And he is reading quotes regarding this topic into the member for Fisher. When I'm dealing with a point of order, do not interject to assist the House, please. So I'll make sure he's being directly relevant. If he was talking about another topic, he wouldn't be directly relevant. But I want to listen to what he has to say about this topic. Prime Minister.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'm going directly to the issuing of passports and why it happens in a normal way, no matter who the government is, because Australian citizens
Order.
have rights. And the Constitution has not changed. The Constitution has not changed. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed from the time that former Prime Minister Morrison spoke about normal assessments would have to be done, including formal identification and checking citizenship. Where those issues are able to be addressed, we would follow the normal processes for issuing of travel documents. Mr Morrison said. And then it goes to, as well, what people on your front bench appointed by you has had to say.
The Leader of the Nationals.
Although many of these people are of counter-terrorism interests, under Article 12.4 of the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, it is their right as Australian citizens to return to Australia. That's what they had to say. And on my watch, while I've been Prime Minister, this is what the member for Riverina had to say. All the shock jocks and so many people who call themselves patriots will say they shouldn't be allowed back into Australia, but they're Australian citizens, so you can't leave them stateless, so are entitled to come back here. That's what the member for Riverina said just in October last year.
Look, I'm not happy with this yelling that has just enveloped the parliament this week. We're not just going to have people just having a free-for-all. No one would expect this as acceptable behaviour. So, giving everyone a chance to reset, and this constant yelling is not acceptable. No one watching this thinks that's acceptable behaviour. Okay? I will take action if required, and don't forget we can exclude people for 3 hours. I'd like everyone to stay here for question time so we can all listen to the questions and answers. And now we'll hear from the honourable member for Brisbane.
Thank you. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering for working Australians, especially women? Has anything threatened this progress, and what is the importance of transparency in this policy area?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Brisbane for her question, and who's playing such an important role as the member for Brisbane, and it's a pleasure to once again be welcomed back into the electorate of Brisbane, it must be said, over recent times. The gender pay gap in Australia is now at a record low, Mr Speaker, something welcomed by this side of the House. And it hasn't happened by accident. It's happened because this side of the House has put in place laws to make a difference, whether it be making gender pay equity one of the objectives of the Fair Work Act, whether it be targeting feminised industries such as childcare and aged care to make sure that people get a fair go, whether it be the measures that we've put in place to protect penalty rates. All of those measures are about people earning more, and when it comes to keeping more of what they earn, our tax cuts particularly have benefited women, who tend to be, compared with men historically, have been under more low and middle income earners. But we've also, of course, had a policy of supporting working from home. Now, all of these policies have something in common as well. They've all been supported by this side of the House, and they've all been opposed by that side of the House as well. And indeed, it was just 1 year ago that the opposition leader and Senator Hume told the Australian people they wanted to ban working from home. 1 year ago today. And what are the consequences of that?
Order.
They've made them the leader and the deputy leader of the Liberal Party. So bereft were they had to find a deputy leader in the other chamber. I don't know what that says about the others who sit on the front bench over there. And the view, of course, hasn't changed. The opposition leader has, of course, appointed Senator Hume as the Shadow Minister for Workplace Relations. What could go wrong? What could go wrong, Mr Speaker? And she told the Sydney Morning Herald that banning from working home was a good policy that hadn't found its appropriate time. So it's still on the agenda. And I'm asked about transparency. Now, there's a little report, the review of the 2025 federal election, Mr Speaker, by those opposite, that says this, and I quote, "At least one regional candidate considered the working from home policy was the turning point which cost her the seat." Now, I'm asked about transparency, Mr Speaker. They don't get to read their report, so I table it for them so that they can read the report about the diabolical campaign that they ran about why working from home was wrong and all their policies were wrong.
Order. Members on my right. Order. Order. The member for Groom, I won't be counselling again. You've been interjecting continuously throughout question time. You've had a really good go. You're warned. So I'm asking you to assist the House by showing the respect to the House by not interjecting anymore. Okay? I'd like to now hear Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Home Affairs, and it follows the Prime Minister's earlier refusals to answer the question. Can the Minister confirm that none of his staff or departmental officials made representations to any relevant departments or agencies to support or expedite the issuing of Australian passports to ISIS sympathisers in Syria?
Call to the Leader of the House.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And I notice they're not asking questions about the private members' bill that they tried to introduce. Jail the baggage handlers seems to have gone away.
Order.
And the Americans.
Oh, that's right, and the Allies. Criminalise the Allies is what they tried to introduce to the Parliament earlier.
Order. The Leader of the House. Order. The Leader of the Opposition. I want to hear from the Leader of the House, but the Leader of the House will also return to the question.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. The cohort concerned have asked to be repatriated. They were told no. They tried to take us to court to force a repatriation. We fought that case and we won. Then they asked again for a repatriation and we said no. Public servants have done what they legally are obliged to do and no more. That does not constitute assistance. We've made clear that this group will not be assisted by the government, and they have not been.
Interjecting. The Leader of the Opposition. Order. Order. When the House comes to order, I'd like to hear from the honourable member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How will the Albanese Labor government's superannuation reforms help workers, and how does this fit into the government's broader economic plan? How does this compare to other approaches?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Speaker. The member for Bennelong plays a very influential role in our economic policy and our team. I appreciate it and our team appreciates it as well. Because the economic plan that we advance in the government's fifth budget is focused on three key challenges. The near-term pressures on inflation, the long-standing challenge we've got with productivity, and also this global economic uncertainty that we are dealing with. Now, the global economy was already volatile before the dramatic escalation of hostilities in the Middle East, and inflation was already higher than we would like. But the conflict will exacerbate both of those challenges and could weigh on global growth, Mr Speaker. We're monitoring developments very closely in oil and gas markets, fertiliser markets, transport and in insurance as well, Mr Speaker. Now, tomorrow we'll get a good sense of how our economy finished the year when the December national accounts are released. And we know from partial data already to expect the recovery in GDP growth to continue. We expect the data will confirm the story of 2025 was a handover from public to private-led growth, and we expect that to continue even with the strong defence spending we saw in today's public demand figures. Now, all of this will inform our plan, which is all about making sure that more Australians can earn more and keep more of what they earn, but also retire with more as well, Mr Speaker. And our tax cuts are important there, but also our changes to superannuation. Our reforms to super will make the super system fairer from top to bottom. It means more super for people with the lowest balances and more sustainable tax concessions for people with the biggest balances. And it means 1.3 million Australians will get a super boost, mostly women and mostly young people, Mr Speaker. Now, this is opposed by the same old Liberal Party, who will vote for less super for people on low incomes and bigger tax breaks for people with tens of millions of dollars in superannuation. But the Shadow Treasurer wants to go even further. He wants to completely dismantle compulsory superannuation in this country. That's what he told Andrew Bolt on the Bolt Report, Mr Speaker. They hate superannuation over there, and he hates super the most, and workers would pay the price for their extreme ideology.
The Leader of the National.
This is what happens when you bring together the worst minister in the Morrison government and the most extreme Shadow Treasurer in memory, Mr Speaker. Working people would be worse off while they work and now also when they retire. This side of the House is delivering tax cuts more super and fairer tax breaks to help deal with intergenerational issues in the tax system. They are the same old Liberals who haven't changed a bit and haven't learned a thing.
Before I call the member for Kennedy, I'll just deal with a couple of items quickly. The member for Groom didn't hear me well enough and he interjected right throughout that answer, so he'll leave the chamber due to the causes of his actions. And I'm also pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today— Yeah. Just allow the House to settle so I can do an acknowledgement. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is Mr Tommy Quick and members of the Stroke Foundation as guests of the member for Maribyrnong. At age 12, Tommy's life changed dramatically when he suffered a stroke. He was forced to relearn everything, including his speech, and continues to live with the ongoing impacts of childhood stroke. Through resilience and determination, Tommy found renewed purpose in 2007 when he trialled a recumbent trike. Tommy has ridden an extraordinary 156,000 kilometres across Australia in support of childhood stroke awareness and has spent the last 8 days riding from How Long to Parliament House, arriving in time for Childhood Stroke Awareness Week and question time today. On behalf of the House, well done, Tommy, and welcome to Parliament. Now we'll hear from the honourable member for Kennedy.
Prime Minister, Australia is 30% self-sufficient in oil, yet only 3% in petrol. Such as a big five in grain and sugar, ethanol feedstocks, we're uniquely placed for self-sufficiency, yet we live at the mercy of the Middle East. Prime Minister, will you, like China, India, Europe, America, Indonesia, Brazil, mandate ethanol, providing $12,000 a year to every Australian family and, quoting Morris Ayema, saving over 1,000 lives a year? Most importantly, my horse has died and it will save me 4 kilometres a walk to buy food.
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I begin by expressing my condolences to the member for Kennedy on the loss of his beloved horse. We all love our animals, indeed, and I know that people particularly love their horses, and a relationship is important. My government knows that fuel security is really important and that it's essential as well that we make more things here. So I'll take on board the comments of and the suggestions of the member for Kennedy and have those discussions with my minister and members of my government. But I must say the principle that the member for Kennedy is putting forward, which is that we need to be more resilient and more self-reliant here, is something that I not only support in theory, we are putting in place in practice. That's what a future made in Australia is about. That is why we are establishing a strategic fleet, so that we bring back Australian shipping, because that is important. That's why we've created an Australian domestic fuel reserve. That's why we're finalising a gas reservation to provide more affordable gas for Australian users and manufacturers. And that's why we're investing in making low-carbon liquid fuels here, building our energy independence and our economic resilience, opposed by those opposite, but something that the minister is, the two ministers together really, are making such an enormous effort in. When the Leader of the Opposition was Energy Minister, of course, he had a different plan. That was the plan for fuel reserves in Texas. That's where Australia's reserves were going to be. Now, if you think about the challenges that the world has thrown at Australia over the last few years, the global pandemic, biggest international energy crisis since the 70s, the sharpest rise in global inflation since the 1980s, and the aftershocks of the conflict, particularly the Russian invasion of Ukraine, what that shows is that if Australia is always the last link in the supply chain, we will be vulnerable. So I want to work with the member for Kennedy and other members across the board to ensure that our economy is more resilient, that we're less reliable on these international shocks that can occur, because they are important. It's why we had to intervene, for example, to put caps on gas and coal prices as a result of that global spike that occurred as well. So my government will always stand up for Australian manufacturing as well. We'll stand up for the good, secure jobs that it creates around Australia, but particularly in our regions such as that represented by the member for Kennedy.
The call to the honourable member for Whitlam.
My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government making it easier for all Australians to see a doctor when they need urgent care? Why does government investment in health, including in urgent care, make sense after a decade of cuts and neglect? How have any alternative approaches been proposed?
The call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Whitlam, who brings a wealth of experience to this parliament, including her time leading one of Australia's biggest disability providers. She completely gets the importance of strong health and social care systems that are supported by government, Mr Speaker. And last week I was delighted to join her at the official opening of the Shell Harbour Medicare Urgent Care Clinic. That clinic was promised by the member for Whitlam, and the only reason we were able to open it was because we won the election, because the Leader of the Opposition at least was up front in telling the people of Shell Harbour that if the Liberal Party won, there'd be no Shell Harbour Medicare Urgent Care Clinic. But it is there, Mr Speaker, and it's already delivering high-quality urgent care completely free of charge. Just one example of the member for Whitlam's promise to deliver a stronger Medicare, Mr Speaker. But her question also implies that there has always been, as there has been, a fundamental difference between the two major parties when it comes to Medicare. And the now Leader of the Opposition is no different in this respect from all of his predecessors. He supported Peter Dutton's GP tax. He cheered Susan Lee when she extended the Medicare rebate freeze for 4 long years, and he said it should be extended to the whole healthcare system. And last term, when he was the Shadow Treasurer, he described our urgent care clinic funding as wasteful spending, Mr Speaker. But not even the Leader of the Opposition has said the quiet bits out loud, quite like the Shadow Treasurer, Mr Speaker. A man who seems completely devoid of an inside voice, Mr Speaker. He's not going to be bothered with freezing the Medicare rebate. He wants to tear the whole system down, Mr Speaker. This is what he's written, Mr Speaker. He wants to see, and I quote, the transfer of health financing shifted from government to individuals. Put simply, every Australian would have an individual health account that they'd contribute to on a periodic basis from their income, and that savings account would be used to pay for healthcare services as required through their lifetime. It's hard to see, Mr Speaker, how a bulk-billed urgent care clinic survives in the Shadow Treasurer's world, Mr Speaker. But still, the Leader of the Opposition thought that this man was the right man to steer the Liberal Party's alternative budget strategy, a bloke who wants to privatise Medicare, a bloke who wants to foist Americanised-style health care on the Australian people.
Order. Order. Members on my right, the Minister for Workplace Relations, the Treasurer. The manager is entitled to raise his point of order, and I'd like to hear it.
Speaker, I would like the Minister to refer to the Leader of the Opposition under his correct title, please.
Okay, all right, just for the benefit order. No, the manager raises a valid point of order. We need to address everyone by their correct titles, but in that answer, I think he was referring to previous roles, and the Leader of the Opposition was the Shadow Treasurer, and there is a current Shadow Treasurer. So we just make sure, if he could be clear of which Shadow Treasurer he is.
The Shadow Treasurer who wanted to privatise Medicare. Maybe the member is right, and the Leader of the Opposition also wants to privatise Medicare. No, they shouldn't complain to me, Mr Speaker. All they needed to do was Google this bloke, because he makes John Hewson look cautious and moderate. They're just the same old Liberals, Mr Speaker.
And I can remind the Minister... No, just I haven't called you yet. Just resume your seat for a moment. I'll just remind the... I'll call you, don't worry. Just remind the minister to direct all his comments through the chair. Now, the member for Goldstein with his question.
My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer rule out a single taxpayer dollar being spent on extremist Islamic prayer groups and places of worship who have been mourning the death of Iran's brutal dictator Ayatollah Ali Khamenei?
Order. Give the call to the Treasurer.
Like that? Yeah?
It's the first question.
Order.
Thanks.
The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. They waited till 2:30 on day 2 before they unleash a question from the Shadow Treasurer, and it's a bad one, Mr Speaker, because as the Shadow...
The Treasurer has just started his answer. He deserves to be heard and respected, as the member for Goldstein was.
Seriously.
And I think it says everything, Mr Speaker, that the first question from the Shadow Treasurer is not a question about inflation, not a question about productivity, it's not a question about global economic uncertainty, it's not a question about superannuation, it's not a question about the government's tax cuts.
Order. The Treasurer is about 40 seconds into his answer, so the manager has one point of order on relevance. Yep.
Thanks, Speaker, and it's 104A, direct relevance. Question was very straightforward. Will you rule out a single taxpayer dollar going to one of these groups?
Yep. So, as I said, the Treasurer, as all Treasurers and Ministers, are entitled to a preamble, so he's 40 seconds in. So whatever he says now, we won't be able to take another point of order on relevance or direct relevance. Just make sure, now that he's had his preamble, can return to the question, and I thank the manager for raising that point.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Like with all public expenditure, we do the best that we can to make sure that public money is going where it's appropriate, and where we discover that funding is not appropriate, if it's possible, we take the relevant steps at the relevant time. And that's been the approach of governments of both political persuasions, to try and make sure that public spending, public money, is going where it's appropriate. Now, Mr Speaker, the point that I would make, the broader point that I would make about this, the broader point that I would make about this, Mr Speaker, is that at a time when this country faces very serious economic challenges here and abroad, challenges that this side of the House is very focused on, what they have shown over there is that they are more focused on issues which are not the central concern of people around the kitchen tables of this country.
Order.
And Mr Speaker, Mr Speaker, having got to 2:30 on day 2 without a question from the Shadow Treasurer, despite the best efforts of Dennis Shanahan and others who have pointed out that those opposite have completely vacated the field on the economy, the Shadow Treasurer, in his usual way, has got up and proven that to be true. If they want to ask me questions about the big economic challenges, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Order. That was pretty clear. I didn't hear any exchange. Order. Order. We'll deal with this. Member for Forrest. Order. We'll deal with this in an orderly and respectful way. If everyone would cease interjecting on both sides, we'd be able to keep moving through the questions, but that's not happening at the moment. So I'll listen to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Speaker. This line of question is obviously getting under the Prime Minister's skin.
Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Do not abuse standing orders when I... Do not get up and simply say what you wish to say. That's completely disrespectful to me and the chamber. Okay. We'll hear from the member for Newcastle.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting Australians to balance their work and care responsibilities? And how does this approach compare to other approaches?
The call to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Newcastle for that question and for her passion in helping Australians balance their work and family life over many, many years. Now, the Albanese Labor government has made significant changes to ensure that Australians can balance their work and life. Our secure jobs, better pay laws strengthen access to flexible work, making it easier for workers to request flexible arrangements like work from home. Analysis by the Committee for Economic Development of Australia suggests work from home saves Australians on average $110 per week in transport costs.
Order.
Now, we know that greater workplace flexibility helps ease the cost of living pressures and, of course, it improves workforce participation, especially for women. Now, Speaker, I am asked if there are any other approaches, and yes, there certainly is another approach, and it was those taken by those opposite exactly 1 year ago today.
Order.
Of course, 1 year ago today, the now Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party did a big announcement in a keynote speech that the coalition, if elected, would ban work from home. Now, this policy would have cost workers more than $5,000 a year on average in extra living expenses. And when the coalition was asked what would they do about workplace flexibility, well, remember what they said? They would force women into part-time job-sharing arrangements. That was their answer. Now, you think that the new Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party would have learnt her lesson. And the Liberals' own election review slammed this proposal, and I thank the Prime Minister for tabling it, but we all actually had a copy. And on page 34, the Liberals, when talking about their work from home, the Liberals, it was said, were unsympathetic to the needs of women to better balance their work and family life. But not even the voter backlash could change Senator Hume's opinion. In November last year, she said that it was the policy backflip, not the policy itself that was the problem. Now, as the Prime Minister has said, you would think that the Leader of the Opposition would be distancing himself from the policy failures, but instead he's promoted Senator Hume into a role where she is responsible for workplace relations. Now, to be fair to Senator Hume, she wasn't the only one. The Shadow Treasurer over there penned another opinion piece, there's a lot of them out there, that said that work from home was professional apartheid. Professional apartheid. The Liberals have not learned anything. They may have changed their leaders, but they're still the same old Liberals.
Call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. The Albanese Labor government promised last May in the member for Bruce's electorate $670,000 to the Taha Association, who have been mourning the death of Iran's brutal dictator, Ayatollah Khamenei. Will the Treasurer act to prevent this payment being made?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This government's made it very clear. Prime Minister and other ministers have made it clear, as do I, that we don't consider it appropriate to mourn the death of the Ayatollah. We have made our views about his brutal and oppressive regime very clear, repeatedly in recent days and before that as well.
Is warned.
We take any breaches of the law very seriously. Our various agencies, the ATO, the Charities Commission and others, have the powers to revoke any of the concessional treatment that applies to organisations. And when it comes to the specific case that you have raised, I know that my colleague, Minister Ali, has been working on this matter, is taking this matter very seriously. And I don't want to front-run her considerations but I know that it's being taken seriously, and I suspect that the minister will have more to say about it in due course.
Give the call to the honourable member for Sturt.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Women. How is the Albanese Labor government working to close the gender pay gap, and what impediments are there to this approach?
Give the call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, Local Government and the Minister representing the Minister for Women.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And can I particularly thank the member for Sturt for her question and for her work in shining a light on how this government is supporting Australian women. And just briefly on indulgence, can I give a hi to Johnny, 11-year-old, who's come up here from Ballarat with his parents because he loves Parliament. So apologies for we're a bit rowdy today. I remind those opposite that women, of course, don't just make up over half of this government. They also make up half of the Australian population. You wouldn't know it quite from looking on that side of the House, though. The release of the latest employer gender pay gap figures from the Workplace Gender Equality Agency reported this morning demonstrate that this work is well and truly bearing fruit. 50% of large employers have an average total remuneration gender pay gap of 11.2, down from 12.1% last year. And 54.7% of large employers have reduced their pay gap in the last year. Across the economy, the ABS gender pay gap has now been brought to a historic low, with the gap being reduced to 11.5%. When we came to government in 2022, it was at 14.2%. In addition to measuring progress on the gender pay gap, the Workplace Gender Equality Agency has identified key measures that can be taken to boost women's economic participation. They include strategies to ensure gender equality on governing boards within the organisation, paid parental leave and other supports for working parents, and flexible working arrangements like the ability to work from home. When workplaces genuinely support these measures, women are more likely to remain in the workplace, progress into senior roles and, of course, build their superannuation. These are all actions this government supports and has taken through policies like our 3-day childcare guarantee, our decision to expand paid parental leave to 6 months, and we're paying super on it. I wish I could say the same for those opposite. You know how Senator Hume described some of these policies, the work-from-home policy? It was welfare and patronising. In fact, we should actually congratulate Senator Hume because today is the 1-year anniversary of the disastrous working-from-home policy proposed by that crack economic team opposite the Leader of the Opposition and Senator Hume. I'm sorry we didn't get you a cake for the anniversary. Perhaps those opposite could explain to me how the policy was going to make it easier for women to rejoin and to remain in the workplace. I checked the party's election review that's tabled. I haven't had a chance to have a copy, but I understand lots have. Or what about the absolute cracker from the now shadow Treasurer when he was asked about whether the burden of childcare raising falls on women, where he says, I can't deny that. You know, as well as I know, it's not my choice that women have children, it's genetic. This is what those opposite think of policies that are actually there to support women. Same old Liberals.
The call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Multicultural Affairs. The Albanese Labor government promised last May in the member for Bruce's electorate $670,000 to the Taha Association, who have been mourning the death of Iran's brutal dictator, Ayatollah Khamenei. Will the minister act to prevent this payment being made?
Give the Minister for Small Business, Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for his question. As the Treasurer said, we take very seriously issues where there is funding for activities or for communities. We take very seriously the use of taxpayer money to fund those activities in those communities. And when we do that with an expectation that those activities and those communities will abide by the law and within the expectations and the standards which Australian taxpayers expect in the use of their money. And this case is no different. So I can assure those opposite that I am doing everything possible, looking into this matter, and I will have more to say on it shortly. Thank you.
Order. Give the call. Order. The House comes to order. we shall hear from the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture. How is the Albanese Labor government ensuring our farmers and producers benefit from more trade and from rebuilding Australian standing in the world? Are there any threats to this trade?
Order. The member for Barker. I could not hear that question because you were interjecting. So you'll leave the chamber under 94A. We just want everyone to be able to hear the question in silence, and that goes for both sides. It's a consistency that I'm trying to improve standards in the House. It may not work during answers, but at least during the questions, everyone's got to be heard in silence. So the member for Bendigo will begin her question again.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture. How is the Albanese Labor government ensuring our farmers and producers benefit from more trade and from rebuilding Australian standing in the world? Are there any threats to this trade?
Call to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I do want to thank the terrific member for Bendigo, and I really do appreciate her taking me around her electorate where we met with some farmers who'd been devastated by the bushfires earlier this year, who had actually lost everything. And I know she's been a real champion for our farmers and primary producers. It was terrific today, Mr Speaker, to stand alongside our Assistant Minister and indeed the National Farmers Federation this morning, where we celebrated Australia's farm gate production value being on track to exceed $100 billion this financial year. This forecast, released today by ABARES, shows our agriculture industry will reach this extraordinary result 4 years ahead of the National Farmers Federation ambitious target of 2030. 4 years ahead, $100 billion of this industry target, Mr Speaker. This is a testament to the hard work and the resilience and the skill of Australian farmers and the work done hand-in-hand with our government, Mr Speaker. As the President of the National Farmers Federation, Hamish McIntyre, said today, this is a landmark moment that does belong to farmers but could not have been achieved without strong collaboration, and it shows that agriculture is an industry worth backing, Mr Speaker, and we agree with the National Farmers Federation there. And that's exactly what our government has been doing from day one. We are backing our farmers and our primary producers. We are backing them to succeed despite the challenging weather conditions that I spoke about earlier and, of course, the floods and the drought that some farmers are experiencing in parts of the country. And, of course, the ongoing global uncertainty, Mr Speaker. When we came to government, the agriculture sector was worth $88 billion. But under our government, its value has jumped 15%, Mr Speaker. 15%. There's more demand than ever for our world-class fibre and our world-class food, with our ag, fisheries and forestry exports forecast to reach a record high this financial year of $85 billion. We recognise the significant benefits of free and fair trade for our farmers and our producers. Indeed, 1 in 4 jobs in Australia relies on this trade, Mr Speaker. That's why we've got on with the job with delivering more opportunities for our farmers, and our agriculture trade is now the most diversified it has ever been, with over 250 market improvements that we have made as a government. But of course, Mr Speaker, that wasn't what we inherited from those opposite. We had underfunded biosecurity, they mismanaged our international relations. We all remember what they did with our largest international relations in terms of $20 billion of trade. Instead of saying well done to our farmers, Mr Speaker, the coalition are jeopardising the success of our $100 billion agriculture industry.
Oh, I thought you were jumping for the next question, but what's... Oh, is it? The Minister's concluded her... The Minister's concluded her answer. Just resume your... Just clarify. My apologies to the member for to the Deputy Leader of the House of Representatives. Order. I thought you were seeking the call for a question, because there was only 10 seconds left to go. So, and now give the call to the member for Fowler. Order. Order. No, we'll just follow the the standing orders, so the member for Fowler now is entitled to her question.
Thank you, Speaker. Prime Minister, your government has found $660 million to develop the $93 billion fast rail to Newcastle, a 194 project promising a 60-minute trip. Yet in Western Sydney, just 34 k's from the new airport to Liverpool, more than 1.2 million residents still have no east-west rail link, a journey that takes 6 to 7 minutes by bus. Why prioritise a high-risk fast rail over the critical link for Western Sydney, once again leaving people behind? How does that make sense?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I really think the member for Fowler. I love getting questions about infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. I love it.
Order.
And I'll be very proud later this year to open the Western Sydney Airport. Something that we argued for way back in my first speech in 1996.
96, McMahon.
Something that was, of course, underway before the Howard government ripped funding out of it in the 1997 budget.
Order.
Something that had begun. The first sod had been turned, and nothing happened for year after year after year under the Howard government.
Keep interjecting, Mick.
But, of course, then we had an aviation white paper that put forward the need for a second Sydney airport, and of course we found once again that Badgerys Creek was the ideal site. But in addition to that, what we're also funding is the road and rail infrastructure that will help with people having access to that, whether it be the East-West Metro link, the Westmead to Western Sydney International Metro, whether it be all of these projects are what we are putting forward. Indeed, we're investing over $13 billion in transport infrastructure across Western Sydney over the next 10 years. When you include Western Sydney Airport and, of course, the wonderful Moorebank intermodal facility, our investment reaches $19 billion. Moorebank intermodal, something that was begun under the former Labor government. There was a bit of an interim period, 9 years, that they tried to forget over there. But we got to open it as well. I got to start it and we got to open it as we went through. The Moorebank intermodal, that will make such an enormous difference. Now, in Western Sydney, we're delivering new rail for Sydney Metro via Western Sydney International Airport, $5.25 billion. We're delivering $1.63 billion to upgrade the M12 motorway, $500 million to upgrade the Mamre Road Stage 2, and $500 million to upgrade the Liverpool and Airport Transport Corridor, 15th Avenue. In addition to that, $100 million for Western Sydney Rapid Bus Infrastructure Upgrade Project. Now that's up and running between major population centres like Liverpool and Bonnyrigg. In addition to that, $95 million to upgrade Horseshoe Drive. All of these projects vital, including local infrastructure projects, the upgrade to Fairfield Hospital. I thank the member for her question, and I'll continue to work across the board with people in Western Sydney to make sure they get the infrastructure.
Order. Give the call. Order. The member for Riverina just needs to take a break from interjecting. Give the call to the honourable member for Banks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Housing, Homelessness and Cities. How is the Albanese Labor government helping Australians into home ownership? What other options into housing is the government being asked to consider?
Call to the Minister for Housing, the Minister for Homelessness and the Minister for Cities.
Speaker, I thank the member for Banks for this fantastic question, and I want to acknowledge the huge contribution that he is already making to the thinking going on in this parliament, even in just his first year in this chamber. Speaker, we've got housing challenges confronting our country that have been building for 40 years. Now, our government listens to the Australian people, and that's why we have created the boldest and most ambitious housing agenda that a Commonwealth government has had since the post-war period. $45 billion, Speaker. We're building more homes, we're getting renters a better deal, and we're getting more Australians into home ownership. Now, Speaker, the honourable member asked me about home ownership. We have just ticked over 230,000 Australians helped into their first home, Speaker. I don't care what your politics is. This is a massive number of people for our government to have assisted, and I want every single one of them to know that it is a Labor government that saw their aspiration and helped them realise it. Yeah. Now, Speaker, I'm asked about alternative approaches. Do you remember the terrible super for housing policy that those opposite took to the last election? Because you're not going to believe this. Now, if you've forgotten about super for housing, let me refresh your memory. This is a policy created by those opposite that would have smashed the retirement savings of younger generations around our country, would have radically lifted house prices around the country and not built a single home.
The minister will pause. There's always consequences for actions. It doesn't matter what time of the day you're warned. The member for Goldstein knows he was warned. I was crystal clear. Don't look at me as if you're surprised. The whole House heard me say it, so you'll leave the chamber under 94A. You can't be on a warning because of disrespectful behaviour and then think you can just keep interjecting. It doesn't work that way. Take the hint. If you're warned, it's a good opportunity not to say anything. Everyone else gets it. Okay. The Minister was asked a question in silence, and I'd like the respect to be shown to her as well.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and thank you for that strong action. I think we all feel we can breathe a little bit fresher air now that that Shadow Minister's gone. Now, Speaker, let me come back to it. Super for housing, one of the most dud policies that anyone could have come up with. In fact, economist Sol Eslake memorably said that if this were implemented, it would be one of the worst public policy decisions of the 21st century. Quite a feat. Now, it looked like the Shadow Housing Minister had read the overwhelming evidence about this. He told the ABC earlier this term they won't have that policy again, and in a moment of uncharacteristic accuracy said that he saw that it could make the problem worse. But here's something that will not surprise the House Speaker. There is dissent and disunity in the Liberal Party of Australia. Now, the Shadow Treasurer had been in his role for mere moments before he was bounced up into the ABC studio and undermined his own Shadow Housing Minister. He said that the real problem with their super for housing policy was that it was, quote, too timid. Now, I want Speaker to understand that the Shadow Treasurer not only wants to privatise Medicare, he believes that work from home is apartheid. He does not believe in paid parental leave because he says it's not his fault that women have children. And it looks like he now wants to jack up house prices and make younger generations poorer. Speaker, the chaos in the coalition continues. They may have changed their leader, but they cannot change who they are, and that is a political party without a single sensible thing to say about housing, one of the biggest challenges facing our country.
Concluded. We shall now hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
My question is to the Minister for Multicultural Affairs. In her last answer, the Minister said she is looking into the matter of $670,000 being promised to the Taha Association. When was she made aware of this issue, and when did she start, quote, looking into it?
Good question. Give a call to the Minister for Small Business, the Minister for Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. I refer to my previous answer, but I do want to reiterate something. And I want to reiterate the fact that, like governments, we do give grants to community organisations, whether they be religious organisations, for mosques, for temples, for sporting groups. But we take very seriously our expectation that the activities of those organisations and the activities of those groups are conducted within the rule of law and within the expectations of taxpayers and the standards that taxpayers expect. In relation to the question, and in relation to the specific issue that I know the member was standing up to interject on, I was made aware of this in the last 24 hours, I might say, in the last 24 hours.
Order. Members on my left. The Minister is answering the question directly. Order.
Thank you. Having been made aware Mr. Speaker, that there was an election commitment made to said group. I have now instigated for the department to halt any further actions on meeting the grant or continuing the funding process. Thank you.
Give a call to the honourable member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. What progress has the Albanese Labor government made on implementing reforms to keep our children safe in early education and care? What other approaches to childcare is the government being asked to consider?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Yeah, that was. Thank God for the Treasurer. Can I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the cheerful member for Chisholm for her question. Thanks, brother. Mr. Speaker, I don't think anyone needs a reminder of the sickening allegations of abuse that we saw in centres last year. They shocked the whole country, and I said at the time, I was pretty blunt, I said that not enough had been done by governments, whether it's state or federal, Labor or Liberal. Since then, a number of things have happened. Personal mobile phones are now banned in centres across the country. A trial of closed-circuit television cameras is now rolling out across the country as well. The federal police are involved in this trial. And 63 centres have now been put on notice using the legislation that we passed through this place last year. That legislation gives us the power to cut off funding to centres if they don't meet safety standards. And the deadline for 30 of these centres has now arrived. I can advise the House that 19 of those centres have now suddenly fixed the problems that they had failed to fix for as much as 7 years. And I think what that shows is that the laws that we passed here last year are working, that the threat of cutting off funding has forced these centres to act. And it's not an idle threat. The centres that have not met the standard will now be contacted by my department and asked to show cause why their funding should not be cut off. Mr. Speaker, last week 2 other big reforms came into force. The first of those is the National Worker Register. The events of last year made it very clear how important a register like this is, so that we know who is working where, and we're able to track people from centre to centre and from state to state. That register is now up and running. It's now mandatory to put worker information in it, and centres will now have 1 month to do that. The second big reform that started is mandatory child safety training. And that's mandatory for everyone who works in a centre, and for the CEO too, and the Board of Directors. Of all the things that we do here, it might be this that's the most important, because it's the people who care for and educate our kids in centres who are our best assets here to help keep our children safe. And we've got to give them the skills that they need to identify somebody who might be in their centre who might be up to no good, somebody who might be hiding in plain sight. And this training will now happen over the next 6 months, and centres will be able to close early at 5 p.m. for a couple of days a year to do this training. As part of that, they're going to have to give parents plenty of notice. I know that this is going to be an inconvenience for some families, but, Mr. Speaker, we're doing this for a reason. There is nothing more important than keeping our children safe, and I want this training done, and I want it done properly.
Give the call to the member for Kooyong.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, Parliament House is the people's house. The public should have a say in what goes on within its walls. Every day that Parliament sits, hundreds of lobbyists roam this place. Today it's reported that you've written to the presiding officers requesting yet another review into lobbying, a review which is closed to the public, according to reporting. Will you open this inquiry up to the people, and will you commit to enforcing a more transparent and robust lobbying code of conduct?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question. Indeed, I have written. I can confirm that I have written to the people who are responsible for these issues, the Speaker and the President of the Senate, and for the benefit of the House, I'll table that letter for transparency when I conclude my answer. In it, I say it is my government's view that the review, which is already being conducted, I'm not conducting a review, it's already been underway, provides an opportunity to consider increased transparency and rigour in relation to sponsored passes for Parliament House on the basis of business requirements, particularly in relation to professional lobbyists. In that context, I also consider that the review provides an opportunity to examine the conditions and requirements for unescorted sponsored access to Parliament House, mindful as always of the importance of security. It's my view that this has expanded over the years and that people wandering around unescorted through the ministerial wing and other wings should be cut back. That is my strong view as well. There are security issues in this place as well, as you might have noticed in some other places as well, that have been dealt with, that members have to deal with in 2026. And we need to tighten it up. There should be transparency about these issues, and that's consistent with what my government has done in introducing the National Anti-Corruption Commission, strengthening the Ministerial Code of Conduct, strengthening protection for whistleblowers, increasing funding to the Australian National Audit Office, restoring transparency to AAT appointments and establishing the ART, reinstated a standalone Privacy and FOI Commissioner as well, implementing the recommendations of the Bell inquiry into the multiple ministries of the former Prime Minister, establishing the Independent Parliamentary Standards Commission and working to tackle the influence of big money across our democracy with the changes that passed, that was supported by you, by the way, that were across the board and went through the House of Reps and the Senate in the last term. Now, those changes come into effect on July 1. Unescorted access to Parliament is a privilege. That is a matter. The passes is a matter for the presiding officers. But I think there should be greater rigour around sponsored passes, particularly for professional lobbyists.
The call to the member for Gilmore.
My question is to the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories. How is the Labor government delivering for regional Australians, and how does this compare to other approaches?
The call to the Minister of the Prime Minister.
It's OK, Mr Speaker. I did say I would table the letter, so I tabled the letter.
Prime Minister. Now I give the call to the Minister for Emergency Management, Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Gilmore for her question. At the last election, the people of Gilmore elected her because they wanted cheaper medicines, cheaper childcare, free TAFE, reduced student debt, better roads and tax cuts, and that's exactly what this side of the House is delivering. We're investing billions in remote, rural and regional Australia. We're investing in health, in education and in infrastructure, Mr Speaker, making a real difference for communities across the country. Since coming to government, we have doubled the Roads to Recovery program to $1 billion a year, which is a significant increase to every local council across the country. We have substantially increased the Road Black Spot program funding, which is now investing $150 million each year to fix dangerous roads and intersections. In 2024-25 alone, 102 projects in rural, regional and remote Australia shared in $64 million worth of funding under this program. And just last week, I announced an investment of $3.8 million through our $200 million Safer Local Roads and Infrastructure program to support Thora, Gleneafa, Dorrigo and Bellingen communities in regional New South Wales through the replacement of 2 timber bridges. And the community has been asking for these upgrades for a long period of time, and the Mayor of Bellingen Shire Council said Council greatly values the Australian Government's continued commitment to regional communities. Mr Speaker, I'm proud to be part of a government that is delivering more money for regional roads because our communities deserve them. More projects under round 4 of the Safer Local Roads and Infrastructure program will be announced soon. But we know how much our Medicare urgent care clinics have been a game-changer for Australia's healthcare system. There are now 126...
Members on my left, the member for Lyne.
There are now
Far too much
126 urgent care clinics across the country, 40 of which are in regional, rural and remote Australia. And the new Nowra Medicare Urgent Care Clinic will open this week, thanks to the advocacy of their local member. And they are all getting rave reviews. Micah from Bega took her son to the new Bega Urgent Care Clinic recently. She said it was life-changing. It's a great service, especially when you're not sure when you need to go to the hospital emergency department. And speaking of reviews, Mr Speaker, I read with great interest the review of the election campaign of the Liberal Party. And much to my surprise, not one mention of the regions in that review's recommendations. The Liberal Party did identify that they have even more problems with the female vote, but then they promptly rolled their first female leader, who's from regional Australia.
The Minister... Has the Minister concluded her answer?
No.
All right. The member for Manager was on a point of order.
Thanks, Speaker. The Minister was asked about policy alternatives. Now, how you can see that as a policy alternative is just ridiculous. So I'd ask you to bring it back to the actual policies.
Order. I'll hear from the Leader of the House.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. The Minister was asked, how does this compare to other approaches? And the approach she's referring to is exactly another approach that was taken by the opposition.
If the Minister is... further on the point of order.
That should be, in practice, referring to policies, not on a political review. And you know that to be the case. And if you look at practice, it is the case.
All right.
There's been decisions made on it.
The manager is entitled to raise his point of order and he's doing his job. The Minister is also entitled to do her job to answer the question that she was asked about. If she's talking about reviews or policy, she needs to make it directly relevant, not simply about a political attack on another party. So I'll give the call to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And as I said, their approach to the regions was they didn't have one. But you guys on this side of the House will keep delivering real infrastructure, real investment in education and real investment in health.
Yeah. Call to the member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. According to the New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, around 1/3 of ISIS sympathisers Labor are returning home will settle in New South Wales. Will any of these ISIS sympathisers settle in the Prime Minister's electorate of Grainler, or will they all settle in Western Sydney?
Order. The Leader of the House.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. The government is not resettling anyone. We're not settling anyone. In the same way as under the Morrison government, Turnbull government and Abbott government, when foreign fighters returned under your watch, you didn't resettle them. They came on their Australian passports and returned on the watch of the previous government. We are not involved in resettling any of these individuals. They asked to be repatriated. We refused.
Order. The House comes to order. We'll hear from the honourable member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Speaker. My question's to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitment to strengthen paid parental leave, and what are the risks?
The call to the Minister for Social Services.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Macquarie. I know she's a big supporter of paid parental leave, and I know that, like me, she remembers that Australia was one of the few developed countries in the world that had no government-funded paid parental leave before the Rudd and Gillard governments. We are so very proud on this side that we have not just established paid parental leave, but we are expanding it. And from the 1st of July this year, we're going to expand it again. Families will get the full 6 months of paid parental leave. In fact, under this Prime Minister, we have almost doubled paid parental leave. Families are $12,000 better off when they have a child since Labor was elected, and 180,000 families every year will benefit from this. These families will get more time, more weeks together. more money, higher payments and, of course, superannuation paid on paid parental leave. That means they'll be about $4,500 better off in retirement as well as while they're getting the paid parental leave. More flexibility, more time parents can spend together and, of course, more people are eligible. And when mums and dads get back to work, they'll get cheaper childcare as well. Now, of course, those opposite have been a shambles when it comes to paid parental leave. The now Shadow Treasurer, the member for Goldstein, said, "Paid parental leave to me is a very bad scheme." He said this about the Liberals' proposed paid parental leave scheme. He said, "It's not my choice that women have children, it's genetic." He said, "I despise this attitude that is creeping into society where we increasingly look at children as a burden and not a blessing. People have choices in their lives and they have to live with the consequences of it, both positive and negative." Well, Mr Speaker, we've got a Shadow Treasurer that doesn't understand that children are not simply a private blessing, they are a public good. They are a blessing for all of us, and that's why on this side we want to help families when they're having children. Those opposite had a leader that went to the last election arguing for higher taxes and lower wages for working mums. They've got a deputy leader who said that she wanted to get rid of work from home. She still says that. She says that's a policy whose time will come. And we've got a Shadow Treasurer who doesn't back paid parental leave. Well, on this side, we're clear about what we support. We support paid parental leave. We support cheaper childcare. We support higher wages and lower taxes for working mums. We support flexibility at work. We support lowering the gender pay gap. The biggest risk to all of that is those opposite.
Give a call to the member for Wentworth.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Last weekend I marched in the Mardi Gras, and I recognise that you were the first Prime Minister to do so. But in 2026, teachers can still be fired and students expelled because of who they love, getting a divorce or having a child out of marriage. This discrimination is permitted under federal law in schools that receive federal funding. When will your government follow through on your 2022 election commitment to protect our LGBTQ+ students and teachers?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Wentworth for her question and for her commitment to equality, regardless of who people are. And one of the things that Mardi Gras represents is a celebration of our common humanity whilst respecting our diversity as a society. And it's something I've been proud to participate in for a very long time, since the early 1980s. It is just a fact that students should be respected and teachers should be respected for who they are. I remember, as a student, one of my friends coming to school who'd been the subject of a violent assault because of who they were, because of their sexuality. And that, at that time, was he didn't even report it because at that time, fortunately, society has moved forward and we're far more open about respecting who we are, but we still have a long way to go. I note that in New South Wales there has been an outbreak, and my government, the Attorney-General, is working with the New South Wales government on a number of instances where there have been violent assaults on young people, filmed and put on the internet in order to somehow boast. You know, these cowards deserve to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. For young people coming to terms with their identity and who they are and coming to terms with expressing themselves, it can be really, really tough. And I think that we as government want to play a role, and I'm sure it's one that the member would agree with, of promoting respect across the board as well. We've come a long way, but there's further to go, as the member has said. My government will continue to promote equality, to engage in a respectful way in which every person, whether they're a student, a teacher, are able to engage and be who they are as well. We don't support discrimination in any form on issues such as this. So I thank the member, not just for her advocacy in this place, but for her advocacy in her local community as well. On Saturday night, obviously, I was engaging.
Order.
I was engaging, obviously, in briefings, and there were other things going on. But I do think that we should continue to work together as a society to make sure that every young person in particular feels safe, because they have an absolute right to do so.
Yeah. Call to the honourable member for Bonner.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government helping households strengthen the grid, and why can't we afford to go back to policies of the past?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for the question. 256,630 Australian households have put in a cheaper home battery since the 1st of July, and 1,941 of them have been in the electorate of Bonner, Mr Speaker. Only one of them has been visited by the Prime Minister and I, the member for Bonner, but 1,941 have put in a cheaper home battery, and that is 6.4 gigawatt hours. Now, interestingly, Mr Speaker, in terms of capacity, it took Australia 10 years to put in the first 6.4 gigawatt hours of home batteries and 8 months to put in the second 6.4 gigawatt hours. That is a doubling of the capacity of home batteries under this government, and that is additional to the 9.4 gigawatts of large-scale additional energy that has been added since we came to office. Now, the honourable member for Bonner asked me why we should avoid going back to the policies of the past. It's a very well-crafted question, Mr Speaker, because the plural is important, because we had 22 failed energy policies in the decade of those opposite. We saw 24 out of 28 coal-fired power stations announce their closure with no plan to replace them. And all this led to 4 gigawatts leaving the grid and only 1 gigawatt coming on. And that led, Mr Speaker, they want to talk about prices. Let's talk about prices. Let's talk about the member for Hume changing the law to hide a 20% price rise before the last election, Mr Speaker. I'll table the regulation, Mr Speaker. The now Leader of the Opposition hiding a 20% energy price rise. But just as concerning as the
the Minister's got to pause for a moment. There's just far too much noise from both sides of the chamber. So the Minister can just tone it down, and members on my left can please stop interjecting. We'll get through this. We'll conclude the... Sorry. Order. We shall conclude the question and answer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And the member for Hume changed the law to hide a 20% price rise before the 2022 election. And just as concerning is the shifting alibi. First he denied doing it. On the 26th of October, he was asked about the regulation. I just tabled, and he said, no, I didn't. And then he later claimed it was the Australian Energy Regulator. On the 26th of October, he said, the AER puts it out, not me. I didn't see it. He said. And then, Mr Speaker, on the 1st of November, the story changed, and the member for Hume was asked, does that mean you actually did sign a regulation, that the effect of it was to delay the release of pricing information, and he finally fessed up.
The Minister was referring to the member for Hume when he was the member for Hume. We're not going to get into this continual... He wasn't Leader of the Opposition at the time. I'm listening carefully to what he's saying. He's referring to in a previous capacity.
Well, Standing Order 64 is very important.
Yes, trust me, I'm well aware of that standing order, and I'm enforcing it continuously. But just to have a bit of common sense, if someone's referring in a previous capacity, of course they can be referred into that capacity. So we just deal with it in a common sense way. Order. The Minister has 27 seconds to conclude his answer.
Mr Speaker, the now Leader of the Opposition fessed up and said, "I did. It was recommended to me by the Industry Department and by the regulators what they wanted. It was my department what made me do it, Gov," was his defence, Mr Speaker. This goes to the character of the now Leader of the Opposition. This goes to his character and his conduct. If the Leader of the Opposition is not prepared to trust the Australian people with information, whether it be an election review or an electricity price rise, he is not fit to be Prime Minister of this country.
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. After 22 questions, none of them from those opposite on the economy or cost of living, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.